I froze halfway up the stairs. My husband's voice carried from the bedroom, firm and steady. The words sliced through me. She's just a free maid, nothing more. My heart pounded. The laundry basket trembled in my hands. For 4 years I'd climbed these stairs hundreds of times, carrying his meals, his medications, his hopes for recovery. But when I reached the doorway, the sight waiting for me nearly made my knees buckle. Mark was standing. Not leaning. Not struggling. Standing tall beside the bed, phone pressed to his ear, laughing at something the person on the other end said. His legs, the same legs I'd massaged every night, praying for feeling to return, held his weight perfectly. "Don't worry, babe," he continued, his back still to me. "She has no clue. 4 more years of this and I'll have everything locked up tight. Then we can finally be together." The laundry basket slipped from my numb fingers. Clean clothes scattered across the hallway floor like fallen snow. But I didn't move. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. My husband of 8 years, the man I'd sacrificed my career for, my dreams for, my entire life for, had been lying to me. And I was about to make sure he paid for every single day of it. Before we continue, please write in the comment which country you are watching this video. We love knowing where our global family is tuning in from. And if this is your first time on this channel, please subscribe. Your support helps us bring even more epic revenge tales of life. Enjoy listening. "Emily, the physical therapy appointment is at 2. Don't be late." Mark's voice cut through the morning air as I stood at the kitchen counter, preparing his breakfast. Same routine. Same tone. Same reminder that nothing I did was ever quite good enough. "I know," I said quietly, arranging his pills beside the plate. "I have it written down. And remember to ask about the new exercises. The ones for spinal cord recovery." I nodded, though he couldn't see me from his position in the living room. 4 years of this. 4 years of carrying him, caring for him, hoping for him. My back ached from lifting him in and out of the wheelchair. My hands were cracked from washing his laundry, cleaning his messes, managing his life. The woman I used to be felt like a ghost. Emily Carter, marketing director. Emily Carter, who dreamed of traveling the world. Emily Carter, who once laughed until her stomach hurt. That woman died the day Mark's car hit black ice and wrapped around a tree. "Don't just stand there," he called. "Bring it here." I carried his breakfast to the living room, setting the tray on the table beside his wheelchair. He didn't look at me. Never looked at me anymore. Just stared at the television, chewing mechanically. "Your mother called," I said. "She wants to come visit this weekend." Mark's jaw tightened. "What did you tell her?" "That I'd ask you first." "Good. Tell her yes. And make sure the house is spotless. You know how she gets." I knew exactly how Suzanne Carter got. She'd sweep through our home like a hurricane, pointing out every dust speck, every wrinkle in the curtains, every way I was failing her son. Then she'd pull me aside for one of her talks. "Mark needs you, Emily. He's been through so much. You can't abandon him now." What kind of wife would that make you? The kind who wanted to live, I thought. But I never said it out loud. "I'll take care of it," I said instead. Mark finally looked at me. His eyes, once warm and loving, now held nothing but contempt. "You better." "And Emily?" "Yes. Wear something decent when she comes. You've been letting yourself go." The words hit like a slap. I glanced down at my worn jeans and faded t-shirt. When had I last bought new clothes? When had I last looked in a mirror and cared what I saw? "I'll find something nice," I whispered. He turned back to the television. Dismissed. As always. I retreated to the kitchen and gripped the counter until my knuckles went white. The woman in the reflection of the window looked hollow. Tired. Defeated. But not dead. Not yet. My phone buzzed. A text from Lily, my childhood best friend and the only person who still remembered the woman I used to be. "Coffee later? You sound stressed in your messages." I typed back quickly before I could change my mind. "Yes. I need to get out of here." The coffee shop felt like another world. People laughed and talked about normal things. Work deadlines, weekend plans, movies they'd seen. I sat across from Lily, my hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. You look exhausted," Lily said, her voice gentle but concerned. "When's the last time you did something for yourself?" I tried to remember. "I don't know. It's hard to leave him alone for long." "What about respite care? Or asking Suzanne to help?" A bitter laugh escaped me. She helps by telling me everything I'm doing wrong. And respite care costs money we don't have. Mark controlled our finances completely now. Every penny accounted for. Every expense questioned. I got an allowance for groceries and household items. Everything else required his permission. This isn't healthy, Emily. For either of you. He needs me. The words came automatically, programmed after years of Suzanne's guilt trips. What about what you need? The question hung in the air. When had I stopped thinking about what I needed? I made vows, Lily. In sickness and in health. Vows work both ways. Is he honoring his commitment to love and cherish you? I thought about that morning's interaction. The constant criticism. The way he looked at me like I was nothing more than an inconvenience. It's hard for him, I said weakly. He's lost so much. Lily reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. You've lost things too. Your career, your dreams, yourself. That matters too. Tears pricked my eyes. I blinked them back quickly. Crying was a luxury I couldn't afford. Mark hated when I cried. I should go, I said, checking my watch. He'll need his afternoon medication soon. Emily, wait. Lily's grip tightened on my hand. Promise me something. If things get worse, if you need help, you'll call me. Day or night. I nodded, though we both knew I wouldn't. I'd been drowning for so long, I'd forgotten how to reach for a lifeline. But as I drove home, Lily's words echoed in my mind. What about what you need? I was still thinking about it when I pulled into the driveway and saw Suzanne's car parked outside. She'd arrived early. Of course. Through the living room window, I could see her animated gestures as she talked to Mark. Her hands flew through the air, her mouth moving rapidly. Mark nodded along, occasionally glancing toward the door. They were talking about me. I could feel it. I sat in the car for another minute, gathering strength. Then I grabbed my purse and walked inside, putting on the smile I'd perfected over 4 years of practice. Suzanne. You're early. What a nice surprise. Mark's mother turned toward me, her sharp eyes taking inventory. Emily, dear. You look tired. Are you taking care of yourself? The question sounded caring, but I heard the subtext. Are you taking care of my son properly? I'm fine, I said. Just busy with Mark's appointments and therapy. Of course. Such a devoted wife. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Mark was just telling me how much he appreciates everything you do. I looked at Mark. He stared at the television, his jaw set in that familiar line of irritation. Can I get you some tea? I offered. That would be lovely. And Emily? We need to talk about Mark's long-term care plan. My stomach dropped. Long-term care plan. That sounded ominous. In the kitchen, I fumbled with the kettle, my hands shaking slightly. Through the thin walls, I could hear Suzanne and Mark talking in low voices. I caught fragments. Not sustainable. Other options. What's best for you? The kettle whistled, sharp and urgent. I poured the tea with mechanical precision, my mind racing. What were they planning? When I returned with the tea tray, Suzanne had moved to the chair beside Mark's wheelchair. They look like conspirators. Sit down, dear, Suzanne said, patting the couch across from them. We have something important to discuss. I perched on the edge of the cushion, every muscle tense. Emily, Suzanne began, we've been thinking about Mark's future. His needs are only going to increase as time goes on. His needs are fine, I said quickly. I can handle. Of course you can, dear. But should you have to? You're still young. You could remarry, have children, build a new life. The words hit like ice water. I don't want a new life. I want this one. With Mark. Mark finally looked at me, and for a split second I thought I saw something flicker in his eyes. Guilt? Regret? But it vanished so quickly I might have imagined it. There are excellent care facilities, Suzanne continued. Places where Mark would get professional help around the clock. Facilities. My voice cracked. You want to put him in a home? I want what's best for my son, Suzanne said sharply. And right now that might not be struggling at home with limited resources. Limited resources. Limited wife. Limited everything. We're managing fine, I insisted. Suzanne's smile was patronizing. Are you, dear? Mark mentioned you've been crying a lot lately. That you seem overwhelmed. I stared at Mark. When had he seen me cry? I always waited until I was alone, usually in the shower where the water could hide my tears. I'm not overwhelmed, I said. Of course not, Suzanne soothed. But think about it, Emily. Really think. Would Mark be happier with professional care? Would you be happier with the freedom to rebuild your life? The conversation continued for another hour, but I barely heard it. All I could think about was Mark watching me, cataloging my moments of weakness, reporting back to his mother like I was some failing employee. After Suzanne left, the house fell into heavy silence. Mark had retreated to his bedroom for his afternoon nap. I stood in the kitchen mechanically washing the teacups, my mind spinning. You could remarry, have children, build a new life. The words should have felt like an escape route. Instead they felt like a betrayal. Of my vows. Of the love we used to share. Of the man Mark used to be before the accident stole pieces of both of us. I dried the last cup and put it away. Tomorrow I would call about respite care options. Maybe if I could get a few hours away each week I could think more clearly. Maybe I could remember who Emily Carter used to be. But tonight I would make Mark's favorite dinner and pretend Suzanne's words hadn't cut straight through me. I would be the devoted wife even if it was killing me slowly. Even if, sometimes, I wondered if that was exactly what they wanted. The house felt different that Thursday afternoon. Quieter than usual. Mark had been unusually pleasant at lunch, almost chatty. He'd even thanked me for the sandwich, which hadn't happened in months. I should have been happy about the change. Instead it made me uneasy. I was folding laundry in the hallway when I heard the voices. At first I thought the television was too loud. Mark often cranked up the volume during his afternoon shows. But as I climbed the stairs with his clean clothes, the voices became clearer. And one of them was definitely Mark's. I froze on the landing. Mark was talking to someone. Not the television. This was a conversation. But how was that possible? His phone was downstairs on the kitchen counter. I'd seen it there when I brought him lunch. Don't worry about it, Mark was saying, his voice carrying through the closed bedroom door. She's completely clueless. My heart skipped. Who was he talking to? And how? I crept closer to the door, the laundry basket trembling in my arms. 4 years of playing the helpless cripple, Mark continued, and there was amusement in his voice. Actual amusement. You should see her, Van. Running around like a scared little mouse, doing everything I tell her. She's just a free maid, nothing more. Who was Van? The basket slipped from my numb fingers. Clean clothes scattered across the hallway floor, but I barely noticed. My entire world had narrowed to the voice beyond that door. The lawyer says 4 more years and we'll have everything locked up tight, Mark continued. Abandonment laws work in my favor. If I can prove she can't handle my care, that she's unstable, I get to keep the house, the accounts, everything. And you know what the best part is? I pressed my ear to the door, my pulse thundering. She actually believes I can't walk. God, you should see her face when she's helping me into bed at night. All that guilt and pity. It's almost too easy. The words hit me like physical blows. Can't walk. Almost too easy. I know, Mark said, his voice softer now. 2 more months and you can move in. We just have to be patient a little longer. Let her dig her own grave. There was a pause. Then Mark laughed, actually laughed, and the sound made my stomach turn. Trust me, babe. By the time I'm done with her, Emily won't know what hit her. My legs gave out. I slid down the wall, sitting in a heap among the scattered clothes. 4 years. 4 years of sacrificing everything, and it was all a lie. I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from screaming. Mark was talking again, but the words sounded far away, like I was hearing them through water. Something about timelines and legal procedures and making sure I looked unstable. He's just a free maid. The phrase played on repeat in my head. A free maid. 4 years of my life, and that's all I was to him. I don't know how long I sat there. Eventually Mark's voice stopped. I heard movement in the room, footsteps. Footsteps. Panic shot through me. I scrambled to gather the clothes, shoving them back into the basket with shaking hands. By the time I heard the doorknob turn, I was standing again, trying to look normal. The door opened. Mark appeared in his wheelchair, looking perfectly composed. Emily? What are you doing up here? His voice was back to that familiar tone. Tired, slightly irritated. The voice of a man who couldn't use his legs. Bringing your laundry, I managed. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. He studied my face. You look pale. Are you feeling okay? I'm fine. Just tired. Maybe you should rest. I can manage on my own for a while. The irony was so sharp it nearly cut me in half. He could manage. He could manage perfectly fine. I'll just put these away, I said, gesturing to the basket. Later. Go rest. Doctor's orders. He smiled then, the same smile that used to make my heart flutter when we were dating. Now it looked like a mask. I nodded and headed for the guest room where I'd been sleeping for the past year. Mark had convinced me it was better that way. Less chance of disturbing his rest, easier for me to hear if he needed help during the night. Another lie. I closed the guest room door and sank onto the bed. My hands were still shaking. My mind kept replaying Mark's words, each one a fresh wound. She's completely clueless. Just a free maid. She actually believes I can't walk. How long had this been going on? Was he faking from the beginning? Had the accident been real at all? I thought back to those early days in the hospital. The doctors explaining his injuries, the prognosis, the long road ahead. They'd seemed genuine. The X-rays, the MRIs, the consultations with specialists. But memories could be manipulated. Medical records could be falsified. Especially if someone had the right connections, the right motivation. My phone was in my pocket. With trembling fingers I pulled it out and texted Lily. Can you come over? Emergency. Her response came back immediately. On my way. I stared at the ceiling and tried to process the magnitude of what I'd discovered. My husband was not paralyzed. He was planning to divorce me and take everything. And there was someone else. Vanessa. Had to be Vanessa Moore, the physical therapist who'd worked with Mark in the early days. She'd been so attentive, so caring. I'd actually been grateful for her dedication. Another piece fell into place. The phone calls that came when I was out running errands. The way Mark's mood would improve after certain appointments. The mysterious improvement in his attitude on days when Vanessa was scheduled to visit. She'd stopped coming about a year ago. Mark had said he'd progressed as far as he could with her methods. But what if she'd never really stopped coming? What if they'd just gotten better at hiding it? A sound from downstairs broke through my thoughts. The front door opening and closing. Mark calling out. Emily. Lily's here. I heard their voices in the living room, Lily's bright greeting, Mark's charming response. He'd always been good with my friends. They all thought he was such a devoted husband, bearing his disability with grace and humor. If only they knew. I splashed cold water on my face and went downstairs. Lily was perched on the edge of the couch, her purse clutched in her lap. She took one look at me and her face changed. What's wrong? Mark was watching us both, his expression carefully neutral. She's been feeling under the weather, he said. I told her to rest, but you know how she is. Always pushing herself too hard. The concern in his voice was perfect. If I hadn't heard what I'd heard upstairs, I would have believed it completely. Maybe some fresh air would help, Lily suggested. We could take a walk around the block. Great idea, Mark said. I'll be fine here. Take your time. He wanted us gone. Of course he did. Probably had another call to make. Let me get my jacket, I said. Outside, Lily waited until we were well away from the house before stopping and grabbing my arm. Emily, what happened? You look like you've seen a ghost. I looked back at our house. The house I'd thought of as home for 8 years. The house where I'd sacrificed my dreams to care for a man who saw me as nothing more than hired help. I need to tell you something, I said. But you have to promise me you won't think I'm losing my mind. Lily's grip tightened on my arm. I promise. So I told her. Everything. The conversation I'd overheard, the implications, the betrayal that went deeper than I'd thought possible. When I finished, Lily was quiet for a long moment. Then she said the words I needed to hear. We're going to destroy him. Lily's living room had been transformed into a command center. Files spread across her coffee table, a laptop open beside stacks of printed documents, 2 cell phones charging on the side table. For 3 weeks, we'd been building a case against my husband that would leave him with nothing. The private investigator's report came in, Lily said, sliding a manila folder across to me. You're not going to like it. I opened the folder and immediately understood her warning. Photographs fell out. Mark and Vanessa at restaurants, at a motel, walking hand in hand through a park. In every single photo, Mark was upright, moving normally, looking nothing like a man who'd been paralyzed for 4 years. How long? I asked. Based on the dates, at least 18 months. But Tony thinks it goes back further. The motel clerk remembers them from 2 years ago. 2 years. While I was giving up sleep to care for him, massaging his legs, helping him with the most basic daily tasks, he was meeting another woman at cheap motels. There's more, Lily continued. She opened the laptop and pulled up a bank statement. Remember how you mentioned he controls all the finances? I nodded. Mark had convinced me it was easier that way. One person managing everything, less chance for mistakes. He's been moving money, Emily. Large amounts, regularly. Look at this. The screen showed transfers I'd never seen before. Money going from our joint accounts to accounts I didn't recognize. Tens of thousands of dollars, moved over the course of 3 years. Where is it going? Offshore accounts. Swiss banks. Places where it would be very hard for you to claim it in a divorce. My stomach dropped. He's been planning this for years. It gets worse. Lily pulled up another document. I had a friend run a check on the medical records from his accident. The ones from his follow-up appointments don't match what his doctors originally recommended. What do you mean? His neurologist suggested he continue physical therapy and try some experimental treatments. But according to the insurance records, Mark declined most of them. He specifically requested to be classified as having a permanent disability. The pieces were falling into place, creating a picture so ugly I could barely look at it. He planned this from the beginning, I whispered. It looks that way. The question now is, what are we going to do about it? I stared at the photographs scattered across the table. Mark smiling, his arm around Vanessa. Mark walking confidently across a parking lot. Mark being the man I'd fallen in love with, just not with me. I want him to lose everything, I said quietly. That's the spirit. But we have to be smart about this. One wrong move and he could disappear with all that money. Lily was right. Mark was clearly intelligent, manipulative, and had been planning this for years. But he had one weakness, his arrogance. He thought I was completely clueless, just a free maid who would never fight back. It was time to prove him wrong. What's the plan? I asked. Lily smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. First, we document everything. Every lie, every manipulation, every penny he's stolen. Then we wait for the perfect moment to spring the trap. How will we know when that is? Trust me, men like Mark always overreach. They get confident, sloppy. When he does, we'll be ready. Over the next hour, we refined our strategy. Lily had contacts, lawyers, investigators, people who knew how to handle men like Mark. I would continue playing the devoted wife while secretly gathering evidence. The hardest part was going home and pretending nothing had changed. Mark was in the living room when I walked in, doing his evening exercises, the ones designed to maintain muscle tone in his supposedly useless legs. How was your visit with Lily? He asked without looking up. Fine. We just talked. Good. You need friends. It's important to maintain relationships outside of caregiving. The casual way he said it made my skin crawl. As if he actually cared about my well-being. As if he wasn't the reason I'd isolated myself from everyone I used to know. Mark, I said carefully, I've been thinking about what your mother said. About care facilities. He stopped exercising and looked at me. What about them? Maybe she's right. Maybe you'd be happier somewhere with professional staff. His eyes hardened for just a split second before the concerned husband mask slipped back into place. Emily, we've talked about this. I want to be here with you. We're a team. I know, but I worry I'm not giving you the best care. Someone with proper training might. I don't want anyone else taking care of me. Because no one else would work for free while he stole their life savings. Okay, I said softly. I just want what's best for you. I know you do. He reached out and took my hand, squeezing gently. That's why I love you so much. The words should have melted my heart. Instead, they felt like poison. That night, I lay in the guest bed staring at the ceiling. Down the hall, I could hear Mark talking quietly on his phone. Probably to Vanessa, planning their future together while I played nursemaid to a man who could walk perfectly fine. But not for much longer. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the photos Lily had taken of the evidence we'd gathered. Bank statements, medical records, private investigator reports. Mark thought he was so clever, but he'd left a trail a mile wide. His biggest mistake was underestimating me. For 4 years he'd trained me to be invisible, to anticipate his needs, to move through the house like a ghost. He had no idea I'd been watching him just as carefully as he'd been manipulating me. Tomorrow I would start the final phase of our plan. The part where Mark Carter learned that even free maids eventually demand payment for their services. And the bill was about to come due. "I think we should have a party," I announced over breakfast. Mark looked up from his eggs, fork suspended halfway to his mouth. "A party? For our anniversary. It's been 4 years since the accident. 4 years of getting through this together." The words tasted bitter, but I kept my voice light. "I thought it might be nice to celebrate how far we've come." Mark set down his fork slowly. I could see him calculating, trying to figure out my angle. I don't like being around a lot of people. It's embarrassing being in this chair." Perfect response. Exactly what I'd expected. Not a lot of people. Just close friends. Lily, maybe a few others. Your mother, of course. People who care about us. "I don't know. Please, Mark. I've been feeling so isolated lately. It would mean a lot to me." I let my voice break just slightly on the last words. Mark's expression softened, not because he cared about my feelings, but because a sad, isolated wife fit perfectly into his narrative of my mental instability. "Okay," he said finally. "If it's important to you. But keep it small. Of course. Maybe Saturday afternoon? I could make your favorite foods." "That sounds nice." He smiled at me then, and for just a moment I remembered why I'd fallen in love with him. Before the lies, before the manipulation, before he turned me into someone I barely recognized. The memory hurt more than his betrayal. After breakfast I called Lily. "It's happening," I said simply. Saturday. I'll make the calls. Everyone will be there." Everyone included the private investigator, the divorce attorney Suzanne Carter, and 3 of our closest friends, people who'd watched me sacrifice everything for my disabled husband and thought I was a saint. They were about to learn the truth. The week passed in a blur of preparation. I cleaned the house obsessively, cooked Mark's favorite dishes, arranged flowers. To anyone watching, I looked like a devoted wife planning a celebration of their marriage's survival through hardship. Mark grew more relaxed as the week progressed. I caught him on the phone several times, voice low and intimate. Once I heard him laugh and say, "Just a few more months, babe. Then we're free." Free. The word made my chest ache, but not for the reason Mark thought. Saturday morning arrived, gray and drizzly. Perfect weather for what was coming. I was in the kitchen putting finishing touches on the food when I heard a car in the driveway. Through the window I saw Suzanne getting out of her sedan, pulling a covered dish from the back seat. "Your mother's here," I called to Mark. "Great. Can you help me get positioned in the living room? I want to be in the chair by the window." I helped him transfer from his wheelchair to the living room chair, a production that involved me supporting most of his weight while he made pained sounds and gripped my shoulders. His performance was flawless. If I hadn't known better, I would have believed he was genuinely struggling. Suzanne bustled in with her usual energy, kissing Mark's cheek and studying me with sharp eyes. "Emily, you look tired. Are you taking your vitamins?" "I'm fine, Suzanne. Thank you for coming." "Of course. Though I have to say I'm surprised you wanted to celebrate this anniversary." She gestured vaguely at Mark's legs as if his disability was something too delicate to name directly. "It's important to acknowledge what we've been through," I said. "How we've grown." More guests arrived over the next hour. Lily came with the divorce attorney, introduced as her friend Sarah. The private investigator arrived as a neighbor who'd stopped by with a casserole. Our friends Tom and Janet brought wine and sympathetic smiles. Mark held court from his chair, telling stories about his recovery process, praising my dedication as his caregiver. He was charming, gracious, inspiring. Our guests hung on his every word. "Emily's been incredible," he said, reaching for my hand. "I don't know what I would have done without her." Janet dabbed at her eyes. "You two are such an inspiration. The way you've faced this challenge together." "Emily's sacrificed so much," Suzanne added. "Her career, her social life. Everything for Mark." "I haven't sacrificed anything," I said quietly. "I've just been doing what any wife would do." Mark squeezed my hand. "See? This is why I love her so much." The words twisted in my stomach, but I smiled and squeezed back. Around 3 o'clock I excused myself to check on the food in the kitchen. Lily followed me. "How are you holding up?" she whispered. "I feel sick," I admitted. Listening to him lie to everyone's faces. "It's almost over. Just a little longer. Are you sure the timing will work?" Tony confirmed it this morning. Vanessa's coming at 4:30. She thinks Mark will be alone. He told her you were going to your sister's for the weekend. My sister lived 3 states away. I hadn't seen her in 2 years. And the recording equipment? Already in place. Everything's going to be captured. I nodded and took a deep breath. 1 more hour of playing the devoted wife. Then Mark would learn what it felt like to have your entire world crumble in front of people you cared about. We returned to the living room where Mark was telling Tom about his latest physical therapy session. Complete fiction since he'd stopped going months ago. The progress is slow, Mark was saying, but the doctors say there's still hope. Emily never gives up on me. I felt everyone's eyes on me, warm with admiration for my dedication. If only they knew. At 4:20 I stood up and stretched. I should start cleaning up the kitchen. Let me help, Janet offered. No, please. Stay with Mark. I'll just be a few minutes. I went to the kitchen and waited. Through the window I could see a silver sedan pulling into the driveway. Vanessa right on time. My heart hammered as I heard her key in the front door, the key Mark had obviously given her. There was a moment of silence from the living room, then Mark's voice, loud and panicked. Vanessa? What are you doing here? You said Emily was gone for the weekend, came her confused response. What are all these cars? Oh my God. I walked back into the living room just as Vanessa appeared in the doorway. She was beautiful, tall, blonde, confident. Everything I used to be before 4 years of being Mark's free maid had worn me down. She froze when she saw the room full of people. Mark sat in his chair, face white as paper. I'm sorry, Vanessa stammered. I didn't realize you had company. I should go. Wait, I said calmly. Don't leave on our account. Mark, aren't you going to introduce us to your friend? Everyone was staring now. Suzanne looked confused. Our friends exchanged glances. Lily sat perfectly still, her phone in her lap, recording everything. This is Vanessa, Mark said, his voice strained. My physical therapist. From before. Former physical therapist, Vanessa corrected quickly. I was just dropping off some old equipment. What equipment? I asked pleasantly. Equipment for. She was floundering. Good. It's interesting that you have a key to our house, I continued. For a former physical therapist. The room was dead silent now. Everyone could feel the tension, but they didn't understand it yet. Mark was gripping the arms of his chair. Emily, maybe we should discuss this privately. Oh, I think our guests would find this conversation very educational, I said. Especially since we're celebrating how far you've come in your recovery. I walked over to Mark's chair and stood behind it, my hands on the back like a supportive wife. Tell me, Vanessa, I said, in your professional opinion, how would you rate Mark's progress? His mobility specifically. I'm not sure what you mean. Well, when you worked with him, he was completely paralyzed from the waist down, correct? Unable to walk, stand, or support his own weight. Vanessa's eyes darted to Mark, then back to me. That was the initial diagnosis, yes. And in your expert opinion, would a man with that level of spinal cord damage ever be able to walk again? Even after 4 years? The question hung in the air like a blade. Mark was breathing hard now, his knuckles white against the chair arms. Recovery varies, Vanessa said weakly. Sometimes there can be unexpected improvements. Unexpected improvements, I repeated. Like being able to stand up and walk across a room? Maybe even walk to a motel? Suzanne gasped. Janet's wine glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor. Emily, Mark said, his voice sharp with warning. What are you doing? I'm asking questions, darling. The same questions I should have asked 4 years ago. I looked around the room at our guests' shocked faces. See, I made an interesting discovery recently. Would you all like to hear about it? No one answered, but no one left either. They were frozen, waiting for the bomb to drop. 3 weeks ago I was bringing Mark his laundry when I heard voices upstairs. Mark's voice specifically. He was having quite an animated conversation with someone on the phone. I paused, letting the implications sink in. The interesting thing was, when I reached his bedroom door, I could see him through the crack. Mark's face had gone gray. Emily, stop. He was standing, I continued, my voice growing stronger. Not leaning, not struggling. Standing perfectly upright beside his bed, laughing into his phone about his free maid, who was too stupid to figure out he'd been lying for 4 years. The silence was deafening. Suzanne's hand was pressed to her mouth. Tom and Janet stared at Mark like they'd never seen him before. "That's impossible," Suzanne whispered. The doctor said a lot of things," I interrupted. But Mark declined most of the treatments they recommended. He specifically requested to be classified as permanently disabled. I looked down at my husband, who was now pressed back in his chair like he was trying to disappear. "Isn't that right, Mark?" "You're having some kind of breakdown," Mark said, but his voice was shaky. "The stress of caring for me, it's been too much. You're imagining things." I laughed, and the sound was sharp enough to cut glass. "Am I imagining the bank statements showing you've moved over $200,000 to offshore accounts? Am I imagining the motel receipts? The restaurant bills? The photographs?" I nodded to Lily, who stood and pulled a manila folder from her purse. She handed it to Suzanne. "Go ahead," I said. "Look at them." Suzanne opened the folder with trembling hands. The first photograph showed Mark and Vanessa walking hand in hand through a park. Mark was upright, moving normally, smiling. Suzanne's face crumpled. "Mark? What is this?" "Mom, I can explain." "Can you?" I asked. "Can you explain why you've been meeting with Vanessa for over 2 years? Can you explain why you've been walking around perfectly fine while I've been sleeping on a cot in the guest room, afraid to leave you alone for more than an hour?" More photographs were being passed around now. Mark at restaurants. Mark getting into cars. Mark being the man I'd fallen in love with, just not with me. "4 years," I said, my voice breaking despite my efforts to stay calm. 4 years of my life. I gave up my career, my friends, my dreams. I turned myself into a shadow because I thought you needed me. Tears were streaming down my face now, but I didn't care. Let them see what their beloved Mark had done to me. "But you never needed me, did you? You just needed someone stupid enough to take care of you while you planned your escape with your girlfriend." Vanessa was backing toward the door, but Tom moved to block her path. "I don't think so," he said quietly. "I think you should stay and hear this." Mark tried one more time. "This is all a misunderstanding. Emily's been under tremendous stress." "Stand up," I said suddenly. "What?" "You heard me. Stand up. Right now." "Emily, you know I can't." "Stand up," I shouted, my voice echoing through the room. The command was so sharp, so unexpected, that Mark's body responded before his mind could stop it. He started to push himself up from the chair, his legs tensing to support his weight. He caught himself halfway up, but it was too late. Everyone had seen it, the automatic response of a man whose legs worked perfectly fine. The room erupted. Suzanne was sobbing. Janet was cursing. Tom was staring at Mark with disgust. Lily was calmly documenting everything with her phone. "You bastard," Suzanne whispered. "You lying, manipulative bastard. What have you done to her?" Mark sank back into the chair, all pretense finally abandoned. "You don't understand. Emily and we weren't working. We haven't been happy for years. So you decided to torture her instead of just getting a divorce?" Tom's voice was ice cold. "You turned her into your servant while you stole her money and cheated on her?" "The marriage was already over," Vanessa said suddenly, finding her voice. Mark was trapped. He couldn't leave because Emily would have taken everything in the divorce. "So instead he took everything first," Lily said, still recording. "Very noble." I wiped my eyes and looked around the room at these people who'd watched me sacrifice my life for a lie. Some of them looked horrified. Others looked ashamed that they'd never questioned Mark's story. "He's your son. You love him." "I do love him. But I don't like who he is, and I'm not going to pretend anymore that what he did was forgivable." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Suzanne asked, "Do you ever regret it? Exposing him the way you did?" I considered the question. "Do you mean, do I regret humiliating him in front of our friends and family?" "Yes." "No," I said firmly. He humiliated himself. I just refused to keep his secrets anymore." Suzanne nodded. "Good. He counted on your kindness, your willingness to protect him even when he didn't deserve it. I'm glad you finally chose yourself." After she left, I sat in my apartment and thought about choices. For 4 years I'd made the choice to believe, to trust, to sacrifice. They'd felt like good choices at the time, the choices of a loving wife, a devoted partner. But they'd also been the choices of a woman who'd been taught that her value came from what she could do for others, not from who she was. Now I made different choices. I chose work that fulfilled me, friends who saw me as an equal, a space that reflected my personality. Small choices, daily choices, that added up to a life that was authentically mine. My phone rang again. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. Emily Carter Consulting, I answered. Miss Carter? This is Rebecca Martinez from the State Attorney General's office. We're investigating a case of financial elder abuse, and your name came up as someone who might be able to help us understand the victim's mindset. Of course. How can I help? The victim is an 84-year-old woman whose grandson convinced her he was disabled and needed her to manage his finances. She gave him over $300,000 before her neighbor got suspicious. My heart ached for this woman, another person who'd been punished for loving someone who didn't deserve it. When can we meet? I asked. After setting up the appointment, I walked to my window and looked out at the city. Somewhere out there was an elderly woman who'd been betrayed by someone she loved. Somewhere else was a man who thought he could prey on kindness without consequences. He was wrong. They were all wrong. I'd spent 4 years learning to be small, to be invisible, to be whatever someone else needed me to be. But I'd also learned to be patient, to pay attention, to gather information quietly. Mark had taught me to be a ghost. He just never realized that ghosts could haunt you. My laptop chimed with a new email. Another woman, another story of betrayal and manipulation. Another chance to help someone remember that they deserved better. I cracked my knuckles and started typing. Thank you for reaching out. The first thing you need to know is this: what happened to you was not your fault. The second thing you need to know is that it doesn't have to be the end of your story. Let's talk about how to write a better ending. Outside my window, the sun was shining. Inside my apartment, I was finally fully awake. And I had work to do. The courtroom was packed. In the front row sat 3 women who looked nervous but determined. Behind them, family members and friends who'd come to show support. In the back, a handful of reporters covering what had become known as the disability fraud ring trial. I sat in the witness section waiting to be called. Mark was at the defendant's table with his lawyer, looking older and smaller than I remembered. Prison had not been kind to him. The prosecution calls Emily Carter to the stand, the attorney announced. I walked to the witness box, raised my right hand and swore to tell the truth. After everything I'd been through, it was the easiest promise I'd ever made. Miss Carter, the prosecutor began, you were married to the defendant for 8 years, 4 of which he claimed to be paralyzed from a car accident. Can you tell the court how this affected your daily life? I looked out at the courtroom. He'd learned from his mistakes with me. But he'd also gotten more careless, Your Honor, I began. For 4 years I believed I was caring for a disabled man who needed my help to survive. I gave up my career, isolated myself from friends, and devoted every waking moment to his care. I slept on a cot in the guest room so I could hear if he needed help during the night. I bathed him, dressed him, lifted him in and out of wheelchairs and beds. I did this because I loved him and because I believed he had no one else. I paused, looking directly at Mark. What I didn't know was that he was walking perfectly fine whenever I left the house. That he was meeting another woman, stealing money from our accounts, and planning to have me declared mentally incompetent so he could take everything we'd built together. The prosecutor walked me through the timeline. The discovery, the investigation, the divorce. Then we moved on to what had happened after. After your divorce, did you have any contact with the defendant? No direct contact. But about a year later, I was contacted by Rebecca Martinez. I gestured to one of the women in the front row. She'd found my name online in connection with articles about spousal financial abuse. She was in a relationship with Mark and was beginning to suspect he wasn't as disabled as he claimed. What did you tell her? I told her to trust her instincts and document everything. I helped her contact a private investigator and a lawyer. When she was ready to confront him, I made sure she wasn't alone. The prosecutor nodded. I testified for 2 hours, detailing the emotional and financial abuse, the manipulation tactics, the way Mark preyed on women's compassion and used their love as a weapon against them. During cross-examination, Mark's lawyer tried to paint me as a bitter ex-wife seeking revenge. I stayed calm, sticking to facts and documented evidence. Ms. Carter, the defense attorney said, isn't it true that you've built a business around playing the victim? that you profit from telling this story. I looked at him steadily. I built a business around helping women rebuild their lives after betrayal. If that's profiting from my story, then yes. I'm proud of that profit. After I stepped down, Rebecca Martinez testified. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Outside the courthouse, Rebecca hugged me tightly. Thank you, she whispered, for helping me see that I wasn't crazy. You were never crazy, I told her. You were just dealing with someone who was very good at making you doubt yourself. A reporter approached with a microphone. Miss Carter, what would you say to other women who might be in similar situations? I thought for a moment, then looked directly into the camera. Trust your instincts. Something feels wrong, it probably is. Document everything. Find people who believe you. And remember, the person who claims to love you should never make you feel small, confused, or worthless. Love doesn't require you to disappear. That evening, I sat in my office. A real office now, with employees and clients and a waiting list of women who needed help rebuilding their lives. On my desk was a photo from Rebecca's wedding. She'd married a man who adored her exactly as she was, who celebrated her strength instead of exploiting her kindness. 6 years ago, I'd been a ghost in my own life, invisible and fading more every day. I thought my story was about sacrifice and endurance, about being good enough to deserve love. But that wasn't my story at all. My story was about learning that love shouldn't cost you your soul. It was about discovering that sometimes the people who hurt you teach you exactly who you're meant to become. It was about realizing that the woman who'd been strong enough to survive 4 years of lies was strong enough to build something beautiful from the ashes. Mark had called me a free maid as if that made me worthless. He was wrong about the worth part. But he was right about one thing: I was free. And I was just getting started.